Hi, this is Julia Walker with Grey Duck Forge, and today we're going to be reviewing the different structures we can find in the horse's circulatory system. So, arteries, veins, capillaries, nerves, and of course, arteriovenous anastomoses. So, all sorts of good stuff. If you're new here, briefly, I make videos going over the main topics that come up on certification exams for farriers. And if you're not a farrier, that's totally okay too. I'm really just trying to make studying easier for everyone, hopefully without making any factual errors along the way. So, with all that being said, let's jump in. First, let's talk about nerve bundles, which form something like a highway system for oxygen and nutrients in the horse's body. Nerve bundles contain three structures: arteries, veins, and nerves. Arteries carry blood down to the cells full of oxygen and nutrients, and veins carry the deoxygenated blood away along with CO2 from the cells. Nerves supply sensation to the different areas of the body, or they tell muscles to contract, depending on the type of nerve in question. So here's a diagram of a kind of cross-section of a nerve bundle, sometimes called a neurovascular bundle. The smallest structure you'll see is typically the nerve, which won't appear to be hollow. And then the next biggest will usually be the artery, which is going to be the tougher, thicker-walled, hollow structure. And then the widest one will be the vein, which will feel softer and have thinner walls. So let's talk about arteries. Arteries bring oxygen and nutrients to the cells from the heart, and the blood inside them is bright red. They have thicker walls because they withstand a higher amount of pressure, with the blood being pumped straight into them from the heart. You can also compare their structure to a hose. That's sort of the picture in my mind. When you take a horse's pulse up by the sesamoid bones, the structure that you're feeling move is an artery, and they split off into smaller arteries as they go, finally connecting to the capillary system. So there you go about arteries. Picture a hose. That's all you really need to know. Veins are pretty interesting too. So once the blood gets to the cells through the capillaries, the blood has to go back to the heart, and so it goes up through the veins. The blood inside the veins is usually a darker red, since it doesn't have oxygen in it anymore. Veins have thinner walls and are collapsible. They also have one-way valves inside of them, which help prevent backflow and keep the blood from pooling down at the bottom of the system, since veins don't have a bunch of pressure, forcing the blood upward, like arteries do, forcing it downward. So remember V's, veins have valves. Cool. Veins also form big interconnected webs called venous plexes. So there end up being a lot more veins in a given structure, like in the leg, for example, than there are arteries. When the horse compresses its foot, the blood in the venous plexes acts as a hydraulic cushion, and then the compression and decompression actually assist in forcing some of the blood out of the foot and up, assisting the veins. So the valve thing, I think, is pretty interesting, actually. Here's a really basic animation of how the veins work. It's not exactly right, but basically there's little stoppers inside the veins that keep the blood moving the right direction. The little dots are like blood cells. So there's an image in your mind. Usually it kind of splits in the middle, but this is the easiest way that I could draw it. Heather Bocheman also posted a really cool video on how the valves work in veins, showing how they prevent backflow, and it's posted on her Study Smart, Test Strong for Farriers page if you want to check it out. So here that is. She's pushing the blood back down, like, away from the heart, and you can see that the valves are trying to stop that from happening. Pretty cool. So there you have it. Valves in veins are, pretty interesting. It's one of the main... That's sort of, the main way valves are sort of the main way that veins are different from arteries. So moving on to nerves. If the nerve bundles are the highway system for blood, the nerves themselves are like the telephone and power lines that run alongside them. They act kind of like wires, so there are sensory nerves, which detect feelings like pressure, pain, temperature changes, all that good stuff. They communicate with the brain to tell what's happening far away, so you can think of those sensory nerves kind of like the telephone lines. There are also motor nerves, which send signals to muscles to contract, and they are the doers, so think of them as those power lines. We don't need to know a crazy amount about motor nerves since there aren't any muscles below the knee, so there's nothing for a motor nerve to connect to, but it's good to know that they're there. Another thing to note is that the exact location of a given nerve, artery, or vein can't be predicted in a given horse or a given leg, because nerves just kind of grow the way that they want to. There's a general idea of where they should be found, but there aren't like coordinates in a horse's leg that you can follow to find exactly where a nerve is going to be. It's not going to be an inch above the bottom of the cannon bone or something like that. It varies a little bit. Horses are innervated differently as individuals. Cool. Also, there are a couple things that we should note that we farriers see and work with regarding nerves. So, a veterinarian can interrupt their ability to communicate with the brain by either injecting anesthetics into them, which we know as like a nerve block, which we see for like lameness type visits with a vet, or vets can also sever them surgically, which is known as nerving. Nerving isn't super common anymore, but it's sometimes used on a horse with, for example, severe navicular problems to keep them going a little longer. Nerving is kind of permanent, but sensation does slowly creep back in over a period of years, so there's a fun fact about nerving for you. But now we know about arteries and veins, but how does the blood get between them exactly? Cells don't exactly typically pull their oxygen straight from the arteries after all, so the main structure that connects arteries to veins is a system of capillaries. Remember, blood goes in alphabetical order. That's like the main thing to remember from today, from A to C to V, so arteries to capillaries to veins. Cool. Capillaries are super small blood vessels that take the blood down to the level of the cells. In our highway analogy, these would be like the neighborhood roads and cul-de-sacs that all the cells would live on. The other structures that can sometimes connect arteries to veins are called arteriovenous anastomoses, or AVAs, which are little shunts that exist to allow the blood to bypass going to the cells entirely for one reason or another. We'll talk about that more in detail coming up. But here we have a quick video of how the capillaries work. Paper towels are actually designed to soak up fluid the same way that capillaries function, so I used it to model how the capillary network works a little bit, so here we go. If it'll play. Alright, here's a paper towel to represent the capillaries, and here's some water with food dye in it to represent blood, and capillaries soak up blood through what is called capillary action, where you'll see it climb up the paper towel when it's dipped in. See it go? And that is how thin little vessels are able to pull blood to all the cells slowly, comfortably, all that good stuff. So yeah, just by existing, capillaries soak up blood that shows up and then gets it to each cell, and then by kind of diffusion and because there's a pressure difference, it keeps the blood going through the capillary system until it hits the veins, and then the blood begins its journey back up to the heart. So kind of a cool way of showing how capillaries work, soaking up things. Our final structure to discuss are those AVAs, or arteriovenous anastomoses. Quite the mouthful, but they are used to bypass the capillary system and therefore the cells, keeping the blood from getting caught up somewhere inconvenient. So in our highway analogy, the AVAs would be like the U-turn strips that cops use between lanes on the highway for speed traps and whatnot, which we mortals are banned from using. It'd be like if we were actually allowed to use those to take U-turns on the highway. They have a couple common uses, so when a horse is standing in a snowbank, for instance, if their hooves got normal blood supply at that time, it would cool down the blood itself, which would either give the horse frostbite in extreme cases or like hypothermia if that cold blood kept getting recirculated up to the heart. So what the horse's body does is it reroutes the blood away from the hoof chorea, taking it right back up the leg using the AVAs, which keeps the horse from suffering the effects of the cold. It's also why hooves grow slower in winter when their feet freeze. There are also, the AVAs are also implicated during laminitis, where they may be overused. So laminitis negatively affects the circulation in the lamina, which we know, possibly by turning on the signals to use AVAs, cutting off circulation to the feet even more, and in doing so actually causing a lot of harm. So there you go. Kind of an interesting structure. Gregory talks about the laminitis connection a bit in his textbook if you're interested. So this is kind of a classic circulation diagram showing the main connection between the arteries and the veins using that capillary system. You can also see there's that separate bypass that misses the capillaries, being an AVA. It should probably actually be on the side of the heart, but details. And this is sort of how the blood moves through the system. You may have noticed I'm having a bit of fun with this whole animation business, but the blood goes into the arteries, then through the capillaries, then back up the veins to the heart. Easy peasy. Another way that I like to think of the circulatory system in general, like in my mind, is like a water wheel in a pond. So the arteries are dumping a steady stream down into the pond, and the pond kind of represents the capillary system, and then the veins are, the cells are living off the capillary system, getting that fresh water, and then the veins are taking the water back up, like one bucket at a time, using the back pressure from the arteries, moving it up in increments, just like the valves and the veins do. So there's another picture for your mental image. Cool. To review, here's a visualization that we can use. It's sort of like what circulatory structure could each part of this be. So let's take a look. In the middle, we have what looks like a highway, so that's probably our nerve bundle. We have a wire running alongside the bundle, this hot pink business, and that is probably going to be our nerve itself. You see how it kind of supplies all the houses here with power or whatever. And then we have 2 lanes of traffic, one taking the exit off to the neighborhood of the cells, and then one taking like an entrance ramp on to go back up to where all these cells are coming from. So if you're kind of thinking about it that way, imagine the heart being over here. That would make this the artery, this red lane, and then that blue lane is probably that vein. Cool. Now we have the cells already labeled so we don't get lost. But the cells are on these little roads off the side roads, cul-de-sacs. So knowing that, you could picture that these businesses are capillaries. Awesome. So that just leaves one more structure. Do you remember what it was? Can you see it on the diagram? It's bright light blue connecting the 2 lanes of traffic. Well, that's right. This right here is an AVA. Fantastic. Obviously, this isn't a complete or perfect analogy for the circulatory system, but I figured since we farriers spend a lot of time on the road, comparing the structures of the circulatory system to things that we see all day, every day, helps keep them fresh in our memory. So hopefully that helps you. But now, at long last, let's actually review a little bit. Up top, I did a new thing and cited where in our horseshoeing textbooks a person might go to read more on these subjects if a person were studying for, let's say, an exam. But from what we learned today, we know that blood flows in alphabetical order from arteries A to capillaries C to veins V. Cool. We know that AVAs provide a bypass they bypass the capillaries, so they send blood straight from an artery to a vein, but they're just not always used. Arteries are like hoses because they need to have a lot of strength. Veins have valves, that's sort of the main thing about them. Nerves are like the wires, and capillaries behave like paper towels for some reason, which is kind of cool. There are 2 types of nerves, the sensory nerves for sensations and motor nerves for moving muscles. And we also know that the exact location of a specific branch of a nerve, artery, or vein may differ leg to leg because every leg is uniquely innervated. And that's it. Those are kind of the key takeaways. Fantastic job sticking through the whole video. You made it. We've now reviewed all the main structures of the circulatory system. We're going to keep chugging along with circulatory system stuff for a few more videos. So next up we'll be talking about the artery locations for farriers. I'll try to draw you a memorable map of the horse's leg with all the arteries in it. Hopefully it'll make some sense by the end. Wish me luck in my preparations because I've never tried to draw that before. As always, if this video needs any corrections or you have any other feedback, please feel free to bring it up in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Do you have any questions about the circulatory system? What are your main roadblocks, or what feels mysterious to you? Is there anything in particular you'd like to see broken down in this video series? I look forward to hearing your thoughts. But for now, best of luck in your studies, stay safe out there, and as always, stay tuned for more.